Hello, my name is Gary Mansfield, and this is the Ministry of Arts podcast, where each week I'll be speaking to a different artist. Now let's begin by bagging these bongos.
Yeah, right. Crazy.
Hello and welcome to episode 256 of the Ministry of Arts podcast. Before we go any further, I know you've heard it a million times before, but thank you to our Patreon supporters, without whom we would not be able to produce this podcast. Likewise, those of you that may have made purchases from our merch store. Info on both will be coming up at the end of this episode, which features live artist, curator and producer Katy Baird. I've not met Katy before, but we had a lot of fun recording this episode, and it's one you're going to absolutely love. And when we recorded this episode, she had just finished her run of Get Off at the Battersea Arts Centre. And while you're listening to this episode, why not go over to Katy's Instagram profile, which is the New Look Katy B. And afterwards, if you want to hear more episodes featuring live artists, we have episode 240, which was Martin O'Brien, Lois Keedon at episode 150, and way back when, at the start of this podcast, episode 13, Franco B, which I've got to say was one of my all-time favourites. But as I said previously, you're going to love this episode. So sit back, relax, as I introduce you to Katy Baird.
Hello.
Hello, Katy. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm good. Yeah, for a Monday morning.
Oh, yeah, it's not bad. Eh? Whereabouts are you?
I'm in Hastings at the moment. That's where
Nice.
I live.
I like Hastings.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah, have you
Hastings
been
a
down
lot.
here before? Yeah.
Yeah, I like it a lot down there.
Good.
Whereabouts are you, Ren? I
I'm
don't
just
know it
gonna-
well, but where are you roughly?
I'm in St Leonard's.
Prefer St Leonard's, to be honest.
Yeah, everybody does. Yeah. I mean, it's a kind of town of three halves. You got St Leonard's, and then you've got the new town, which is like your high street, and it's got all the usual places, and then you've got the old town. So you find whoever lives in each place is very much, this is the best bit.
Yeah,
So,
I went to interview a couple of artists in St Leonard's about,
Oh,
when I started this really, about 5 years ago. And I didn't really know St Leonard's. I knew Hastings. Yeah, as soon as I went to St Leonard's, that felt a bit more homely, less like a tourist going around there, you know?
yeah, although, I mean, it's changed. Even I've been here 5 years actually, so definitely a newbie. But even in that 5 years, it's changed so much. Also with the lockdown and everything, everybody sort of moved en masse out of London and came
Yeah.
to the wee towns. So, and it's good and it's bad, like everything in it. Do you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
good bits, there's bad bits, but it's yeah, you're kind of in amongst it all sometimes, and it feels like God, how can we stop this? But I really want to have this coffee. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Did you manage to see my show in Battersea? Did you
No.
get and then?
No. But I've seen a few little clips online and that. Battersea's a cool place, isn't it? The Arts Centre. I know you've
It
been there a
is good.
few times, but
It's
it's a
good.
cool
They're doing
place,
really
isn't
good
it?
stuff there at the moment. Yeah. Well, even if I do say so myself.
Yeah. Well, it did up until last week.
Yeah.
It's gone downhill since the 25th. Yeah, I performed there in 2012. There was a thing called London Stories. I didn't realise that the whole thing was a performance. I thought they was just getting people off the streets to tell a story.
Right.
And I've got a little bit of a juicy story in my past. Thought everyone was just a newbie off the streets, but it turns out that most of them were artists that were telling a part of their true story.
Yeah.
But they was performing it. They knew how to perform it, whereas I was telling it.
Yeah.
Although I did notice the way I told it did turn into a bit of a performance in the end,
Yeah, you can't help it. Did you do it a few times? Was it just you in front of an audience?
It was me in front of two people, but there was 20 of us in front of two people, and one of those two people each time went with someone else to make two people. So they had the experience of being with 19 other people that night,
Wow.
listening
Wow.
to 20 stories.
Oh, wow.
I may have got the numbers a little wrong there, but
Yeah,
that was
but
the premise of it. So I performed it, I think it may have been like 6 times a night,
wow. And
something
did you
like that.
enjoy it, the performance? I mean,
I
it's quite
was,
intense. That's a very small audience.
yeah, I was up in the loft.
Okay.
It was called, I can't remember what it was called. It was called like the stage keeper's room or something like that.
Yeah.
This little room, and there was just me at a table, no lights on, or like two set spotlights in the corners. But
Yeah.
there was me, a coffee table, a candle, and 2 seats.
A real candle.
Yeah,
Well, it must have been before the fire, because you
it
don't
was
come
before.
down.
It was
Was
before
it
the fire.
literally like the night
Yeah.
of the fire?
Yeah, just a few hours before.
It was a different time. You wouldn't get that now. There's not a
No.
naked flame to be found in that building.
Yeah, but that's what it was at the time.
That
But
sounds
yeah,
great. You don't get much one-on-one performance anymore. Actually, I was funny. I was thinking about that last night, because I know you were. One of the questions is like, who else would you want to be on with, or how would you? And I thought, God, what happened? There used to be loads of one-on-one festivals, and it's a really powerful type of performance. But I think it just doesn't. I think it just costs too much for the amount of people you reach.
yeah.
And
Well, I suppose that night there was only, even if it was 30 artists, that meant there was only 60 people.
yeah,
So that's a very small audience, and that was over the whole of the Battersea Arts Centre,
yeah,
in all the nooks and crannies. There was people on like the staircase as you go in. There was people down the
yeah,
corridor where the toilets, or where one lot of the toilets are. So they took over the whole place.
yeah.
But it was an amazing thing to be a part of. Right, Katy, Baird, my first question.
Mm.
How would you explain what you do to someone that doesn't know your work?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? I think I always find that struggle to answer that question, and I guess it always kind of depends on who I'm with and where I am as well, I suppose, in some ways, because I guess like so many artists and just in general, everyone now, you've got so many hustles going on, and there's so many different stuff you do. I guess I would say I make performance. I used to say I'm a bit like a stand-up comedian, but there's no jokes.
Yeah, but I'm not funny.
Not funny. Because I guess because it's not like I make work for theatre spaces, I suppose. But it's not theatre as in I'm pretending to be someone else. It's direct address. It's often about in some ways about my life, but about other things as well. But then I also work a lot in clubs and cabaret settings, so I do a lot of performances. Although actually not I've been doing less and less of that. I think I'm a bit older now and just hanging about to midnight or 1 a.m. to go on stage. I'm a bit, I'm like, oh God. But that's that's kind of where I cut my teeth. And it's where I still, if I'm making a show that sits within a theatre, I'll often try elements out in clubs.
Yeah.
Particularly queer clubs. I've got a residency, we call it, at Knickerbocker in Hackney, where I can just sort of try things out. And I work a lot with Ducky, which is a sort of queer club institution. I think they've been going for like 31 years now or something like
Okay.
that. And it's really useful to be able to try different things out in different contexts, because obviously all audiences are really different and you can see what kind of hits and what doesn't. And then I also I run an arts organisation in Hastings where I live, which puts on events, supports artists, performance, mostly home live art. I guess I just like to gather people together in a room and to think about stuff and have a good time. No, it's hard. It's just impossible to answer that question, I find.
Well, that's the good thing, is like you say there, just getting a group of like-minded people all thinking about the same thing. It just generates a really good atmosphere, doesn't it?
Yeah. Or not, they don't even have to be like-minded. That's why I quite like theatre as a space, because not necessarily in London, but if you go to theatres outside, smaller theatres, regional theatres, and you're doing sort of more experimental performance, like the reception and the engagement is just so different, but you can really play around with the expectations of what they think might happen in a theatre and what might not, and stuff like that. And I really, really enjoy that. I've made a new solo work recently, which I just did a 3-week run at Battersea Arts Centre. And that was quite a large scale production. And I'm making it into a smaller production as well. We're calling it an accordion type, so that I could go to other venues. So I'm going to Norwich, I'm going to Hastings, I'm going to Colchester, and hopefully some other places, because I love those audiences as well. I love the art audience. I love the London audiences, but when you get out, it's a completely different experience. And my work is really about being in the room together. I like to say it's a bit like we're all down the pub together. That's the kind
Yeah.
of vibe I like to create. I used to be part of this collective in London. We put on lots of events, Steakhouse Live, and our motto was we embrace unprofessionalism. I can't bear it when you go to places and it's like you have to act in a certain way and you all have to be quiet and you have to
Oh,
be in the dark, or you have to go to the I can't bear it, do you know what I
no.
mean? So it's like I think everything I do is really with that in mind, is like, how can we make this a welcoming space, but also radical, also uncomfortable, also everything, but still you feel like it's a space for you, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, if there's a thing about being comfortable, I sort of don't even like it myself to be comfortable in any environment. I like there to be a little bit of something inside. And like you were saying there, when I'm in one of those environments where you have to act a certain way, I almost turn into a pedant or a teenager where
Yeah,
I have to do something just to disrupt it, even just one little bit, even
yeah.
if it's just for me. I can say that I didn't sort of conform, if you like.
Yeah, I think the exact same. But I also think there's something quite annoying about, like, particularly in performance, if it's participatory or whatever, that there's an expectation that they think you're going to do one thing. It's like, well, you shouldn't really assume anyone's. I remember years ago I was in Bristol and there was this performance, and it was participatory, and you were to recreate a new world or whatever, and we just went off the rails. We would. I just love playing around with those ideas of expectations. It's like, don't, if you're going to do something with an audience, or if you're going to tell me to do something, you've got to be prepared for me to be able to not do that.
Yeah.
And then they're all like, oh my God, and it's like, well, this is what you set up. We're not all just going to be sitting going, oh yeah, okay, okay. Like, that's not life. And also, yeah, I find that quite frustrating to have when artists have expectations of the audience. I'm just like, no.
Well, where did that wanting to perform come from? Did you have art in the home growing up?
Not really. I'm from Glasgow, as you can tell by the accent.
I did hear a little
Yeah.
twinge.
Oh, don't say that. Because I've been down south way too long. When I go home, everyone's like, oh, Katy lives in London. Oh. My accent down here, I do sound Scottish, but up the road, as we say in Glasgow, I sound, very different to my
Yeah.
family and different in general, because my accent has softened so much. But not really. I'm from a big Irish Catholic family. We went to the pantomime. I think that was like the first sort of theatre that I saw. And then in the 80s, there was a lot of in Glasgow, there was a lot of sort of theatre that came to the town halls and came like 784, that toured all around. Very political. I think one of the first things I remember going to see when I must have been about 11 or 12 with my mum, was 784, and it was this massive Maggie Thatcher head, like paper mache Maggie Thatcher head, with all these people like on top. I can't remember what it's like now, but all on top of it, and it was just getting wheeled round the community centre, and everyone was going boo.
Brilliant.
Uh, so I guess there was some, but it wasn't. It's not. I mean, I think I'm the only artist in the family that I can think of. Although, yeah, we've got some authors and some writers, but I came a bit late to it. I didn't. It was through meeting a partner who was interested in it, as often things are. So it's sexually transmitted. I met a partner a long time ago
Brilliant.
that was into performance, so we started to go see stuff. And then I went to uni, but I went to uni late. I was 28 when I started uni at
Doing
Glasgow.
what?
Well, theatre and sociology. Yeah,
Got you.
so I did. I did, and I'd left school at 15, and then I just kicked about for like 10 years, just working in pubs and clubs and traveling and just getting wasted. And then I met someone, they got a place at uni in Glasgow. We went back to Glasgow because I'd been in London. And then I was a bit like, I was like, what am I going to do? You know, you hit that, you're just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm nearly 30. I wish I could say that now. I'm nearly 50 now, but then I was like, oh my God, I'm nearly 30. What am I going to do? So I did an access course at college, at Stowe College in Glasgow. And at that time it was free. The access, it was free to go to college, and I got a bursary and I got travel. And I mean, it's a
Brilliant.
different ball game now. And so I did an access uni course, and then I went to uni. And in Glasgow, it's 4 years your degree. In the first year you do like 5 or 6 different subjects, and then you choose. And I just kind of, I'd already started performing a little bit, and I just kind of, I did this one module with an artist called Adrian Howells, who's unfortunately passed away quite some time ago. And it was an autobiographical performance, and something just clicked. I don't know if it was, you know, I did
Brilliant. I
it.
love
I
that.
don't know if it was everybody looking at me and listening to me, which I love. I thought, oh, I could get paid for this rather than, or just there was something about it. It just clicked, and Adrian really supported me a lot in that. And then yeah, I ended up doing a degree and masters in performance, and it kind of went from there, you know.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah, it was a long way, but I think by the time I'd got to there, I was ready. I was like a little sponge at uni, you know what I mean? I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
learning. I loved it. There's something about that feeling when you come off stage as well, and it's went well, like you can feel that connection with the audience. You know, it is a great feeling, but all the feelings leading up to it are pretty horrendous for me. Sometimes I'm like, is it a form of self-harm? Because I get so nervous and I get really like, oh my God, and you know, the making of it and everything, because you're putting something out there, and yeah, I don't
But
know
all
if
that time when you're preparing it one to one, I presume, to yourself.
Mm.
When you get up on stage in front of other people, it's a completely different thing.
100%. Yeah, you don't know. And even that, even regionally, it's different, or, you know, internationally. I remember the first time I performed abroad, I think I was in Hamburg, and the audience were just like, you know, very quiet. They weren't really laughing. I was like, you know, inside I was doing the show, I was like, oh my God, I'm dying here. And then afterwards I was like, oh, that was great. And it was just a totally different reaction, or they'd laugh at different bits. Or I think, yeah, that's the beauty. I guess that's why I love it as well. It's because you just don't know where it's going to go or how it's going to go. And I often have audience participation in my work as well. So it's like you really don't know where that's going to go, and that's terrifying, but also quite exciting as well, you know. So yeah, I remember once I was performing in where was it? In Warsaw, and they had the subtitles, English subtitles,
Oh,
no,
wow.
Polish subtitles, but the subtitles were just a tiny bit ahead of what I was saying. So the people were like laughing before I said the punchline, and it was really disconcerting, but
So
I
there
think
was no ad
I had a
libbing
good
on that.
time. I was like,
So
oh
you
God.
couldn't ad lib on that.
No, not really. But you can, and this is the big thing, because we're trying to make the work also accessible for deaf and hard of hearing. But it's like, what do you do in those improv bits with
Yeah.
the audience? You know, at the moment we just say Katy's chatting to the audience, because you can't sort of live caption.
No.
Um, yeah, so there's not much, and I haven't done this. Well, I did this new show. I'm going back to Hamburg actually in August, and I'm also thinking, God, I need to pick the audience participation well as well, because of the language, you know. So I'm trying to think about how all that works at the moment, because it is talking participation, whereas before it was more like you got on stage and you did stuff, so it didn't really matter. But this is much more sort of intimate in a way, so I need to sort of think about all that, how it'll all work. I mean, I'm solo, almost always work as a solo performer, because I think I'm too much of a control freak. And I also, yeah, it means you've got a certain freedom on stage, but then I am also a bit jealous when I see duos or collectives or stuff, because
Yeah.
you're part of a team, you know. It can get a bit when you're on your own. But I've recently, in my last show, I worked with a director an artist called Kim Noble, And that was an amazing experience. I hadn't really worked with a director in that way before.
Yeah.
Just to have someone there that's got your back, that's looking at things that you can talk through, that's like, it was a really brilliant. But like any relationship, it's a relationship. So it's like, you've got to work hard. And sometimes it's like, yes. And then sometimes it's like, oh God, what are we doing here? And then, but it was nice not to be on my own, and I was a massive fan of his work beforehand. So, I mean, I was fangirling for like the first 3 months. I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe. Because I just emailed him and said, I really love your work. Would you like to come in and be an outside eye? I got a bit of cash for a couple of days, and then we just got on, we just clicked.
Brilliant.
And then he ended up directing the show. So
How cool's that?
it was brilliant. Yeah, it was amazing.
And would that be something else you'd do again?
Working with a director. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think I'll make another solo show. I think that's it. I don't know if I've got anything else to say. And it's just an emotional roller coaster for me. I don't know if I'm actually mentally robust enough to do it, because you're putting yourself out there all the time, and I don't know if I can. Yeah, I mean, but you always say that, and then you always like never again, and then you go back. It's still very raw. I mean, I only premiered it 2 months ago, so I'll hopefully I'll rip the arse out it. I'll try and tour it as much as possible over the
Of
next
course.
couple of years, so I don't have to think about it. But it's yeah, it's just for me, it's just quite an intense process, and I put everything, and I'm really like, I don't know, I just maybe get too invested. I think my brain's just like, oh my God, and. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm cut out for the life of an artist.
As you was talking there, I was going to ask if you felt a vulnerability being on your own or a sense of power, like I mentioned about that Stephen Burkoff. But I presume it's a bit of both and back again and at various parts of your performance.
It's a bit of both. It's funny because people often use that word after my shows when I perform, that sort of vulnerability, because I try and sort of look and explore things that maybe we don't necessarily always do, or say the things that maybe we're thinking but we don't say, or look at, I use a lot of bodily fluids like shit and piss and all sorts of different stuff like that. And so and there's a sort of brutal honesty with me, but I never say anything that I wouldn't want to say, if that makes sense. I think that's really important when you're making this type of work. Um, but also I feel very much in control. It's me that's kind of saying it. It's me that's designed to say it and how I say it. I'm often naked, and as a sort of fat, older female body, you don't see that as much. And this new piece as well, I've worked with a choreographer, so I'm doing dance. I'll use air quotes.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something different. I love dance. I've over the last, maybe 10 years, I suppose, I've really fallen in love with dance, particularly sort of experimental contemporary dance. And I never thought I would like anything like that, because it's quite out there and it's not, but I've really fallen in love with it. And so I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna see what happens when this body and this head does dance. So so that's what's and it's really funny because the choreographer and the directors, and I'm like, I can't do this. And they're like, no, Katy, the joy is watching you try to do it. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
That's
Seeing
what we
if you
love, to see
fail
you
or not.
try. And I'm like, I know, but I just want to be able to do it. I think I'll never be able to do it because I've not trained to be a dancer for 40 years. So, but it was really funny. It's like, okay, I'll try. But I think people do, you do like to see that. You don't always want to see the slick, it's like there's something,
Yeah, but
there's
that's like everyone on the dance floor, though, is it?
yeah,
Is a dance floor full of people at a wedding?
yeah,
You'd be lucky if one of them knows exactly what they're doing.
yeah. So, yeah, yeah, I've forgotten what the question is. Sorry.
Oh, so have
I don't know
I. I
what
mean,
it
I've mentioned on here a few times when I've spoke about performance. I personally have trouble reading performance. It takes me a lot longer than it would if I look at a sculpture, an installation, or a painting. But I do give it, I have to give it a lot more time. Like when I went to see
Oh,
Martin
at the
O'Brien's show,
Whitechapel, yeah. Oh my God, it was beautiful, no?
I
Wow.
it, it was scary.
Mm.
It was intimidating. It was beautiful. But it took me an hour to figure out all of that. I did have to sit there and try to read what he was doing and second guess what he might do. And I got it wrong quite a lot. And then all of a sudden, just by giving it the time, I got into the flow of where it was going. I could you sort of understand what's about to come, and then it happens, and
Yeah.
yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, I think the thing is you don't know, well, you kind of did know where it was going to go. There's the framework, but then there's also like, where is this? What is this? But I remember that was a real, like, there was a moment for me, it was a company called Forced Entertainment a long time ago, Bloody Mess. It was at the Tramway in Glasgow. And it was like, I really think of this as a real seminal moment for me because my partner at the time had got into this to drama school in Glasgow and thought they'd got on to like a playwriting course, but it was actually an experimental contemporary performance course. So we started to go and see all this like experimental performance and performance art, and we were like, what is this shit? Like, it was just couldn't, what's it about? And then I went to see Bloody Mess, and there was just a moment. There was like a moment, and there's loads of people on stage, there's loads of mad stuff happening. And it was just a moment for me where I was like, actually, I don't even care what it's about. I just felt something. I just kind of let it feel something. And I think that was a big turning point for me, but I personally in engaging with that work was like, actually, I've just got to let myself go and be in it. And sometimes you can't. I mean, sometimes it's really boring. Do you know what I mean? Like, lots that it's not. I'd say about 80%. So when because it's slow. Sometimes it can be very slow. But if you get those moments, you do get into the zone of it. You do go somewhere with it, and you're not really sure where you are. And what I love is it's really the live. It's immediate. You're not thinking about what you had for your dinner last week or where you're going to go to the pub afterwards. Those moments when you're just in it, I think are really, really special. And then they are few. Sometimes you quite go, that was good, that was okay. But other times you do go somewhere and I think there's something about that really beautiful. Maybe that's why I've sort of now started to enjoy dance as well, because you could sit and go, what is it about and what's going on? Or just sort of experience it in a way. I don't know.
Can I ask, Katy, you say about you've introduced dance, but is it to music or not?
Yeah, there's music. I worked with two sound artists, Nicole and Brecht, and they did a lot of the sound for the show. So yeah, it's to music. Apparently, I've got very good musicality, which is what my
Oh, there
choreographer
you go.
said. But I love to dance. Like I've always I'm an old raver. Do you know what I mean? So I would always go and dance. Since I was like 15, I just love being on the dance floor. Although I can't do it. I can't really again do it as much now. I need like a week off if I go out now. After my show. So I did a 3-week run at Battersea, and then that Saturday night I went out, and I came back at like Sunday evening. And then for like 5 days I thought I was going to die. I was like, oh no.
If you've had choreography training, presumably it was pretty recent. When you go out now and you go on the dance floor, do you dance different to how you did a year ago?
No, I
Are you
don't
reacting to
know.
the music differently, do you think?
No, I don't think I was that with the choreography. What we did was kind of, what did she call it? We created my own choreographic language. So we used
Okay.
movements and gestures
Yeah.
for me. So it wasn't like it was kind of it was a kind of made up choreography in a way, but it was still, I mean, I was moving my body in ways and shapes I don't think had been moved in a long time. So
Yeah, your
but
body told
but
you that the
I
next
need to
day.
I need to play it, because I kept saying to people I've got choreography, and it's not, if you see it. I mean, that's what I've realized about dance, or any kind of movement. It's like it takes so much work to make it look easy. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or to make it look, and that's the thing also about performance. That's really, can be really chaotic, or really like you don't know what's happening or whatever. That is often quite refined and has taken a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But that's also, there's so much performance I love. Is my favorite kind is when you just go and you don't know what's going to happen next, and anything could happen next. Like David Hoyle. I don't know if you know the artist David
I,
Hoyle, who's
I
a
don't
kind
think
of
so.
they just did a big, and I couldn't go because I was away. They did a big exhibition up in Manchester, where they're from, at Factory. But they are a queer artist. They've been around for, maybe 30 years. They used to be the Divine David on Channel 4 in the 90s.
Okay.
And you never know where David's going to go next. So there's something just really, and it's always a bit borderline. You're like, should I be laughing at this? Should I not? Oh, I don't know. And we brought him to Hastings, and he did this whole thing about gay Tories and how we should like string them up, and the blood of and then the parents of gay Tories, and the blood should be falling down Westminster. And I was like, oh my God. And then we got two written complaints afterwards in Hastings at a queer night, saying how terrible it was. And I was like, well, I'll give you your £5 entry. I mean, it was completely like,
Yeah.
and that's David Hoyle. What we're going to do. So it was
I mean,
quite.
some would say that's the proof of a good night when you get complaints.
Yeah, exactly. It's exciting but scary, which is always the best way, isn't it?
Yeah, most definitely. I come up with an artwork. I may well cut this out because I've mentioned this on here a few times, but it feels quite relevant in this conversation. I come up with an idea for an artwork. I called it Walk a Mile, where I would ask artists to send me a letter telling me of an instance that they've had throughout their life that they've kept internalized, that they feel guilty about, something they've done wrong and always kept it to themselves. They would send it to me along with a pair of shoes. And then no matter what the shoes were, high heels, size 5s, I'd wear them, walk a mile in their shoes. And I would sit and read their story. I would judge them, but I wouldn't tell anyone my judgment.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. And I was going to set the shoes somehow, make a sculpture from the shoes, possibly fill them with plaster was my first idea, then break the mold open, if you like, and just have this part of the sole, this inner sort of shoe, if you like. Then that went on from there. As I was doing the process, it went on from not doing a sculpture to doing, possibly putting the letters up, but not allowing anyone access to judge them, if you like. I wanted it to be a private moment, and I didn't really understand. I've never really figured out how that thought process come in and what made me do that. But it ended up, when I mentioned that to people, they was going, well, that is just a performance that you've done,
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And how many shoes did you, or how many?
Hey, it started off 5. The idea was 5.
Yeah.
I put it online to someone. I ended up about 23.
Oh.
Then I went on holiday for a fortnight, come back, and I had loads of them red slips through my door that there's fucking shoes at the post office. Then I thought I'd get up to 50, and I counted it wrong. I had 53.
Wow.
So then I stopped at 93.
No.
Even, I know this is supposed to be about you, I'm sorry, but I haven't
No,
spoken
no,
about this
please.
for years. But even when I got the letter, which was handwritten, never email, always handwritten, my partner would type out the letter so that I couldn't even make a judgment on their handwriting. So I couldn't have any judgment on them. The only judgment I had was when I opened the box or the bag and there's a pair of shoes,
And where
preconceived
did
judgment.
you walk the same mile in the mall, or?
I live on a council estate, and I had 3 different half miles, because I'd walk half mile and walk back home. I'd one across the main road, one down this, a path that went down this, we called it the field, but it was just a strip of grass, to be honest. And the other one was just like through the shops, through the shop area, the shopping parade area.
And did people sometimes ask you why you were wearing these shoes or whatever? Was that part of it as well, or did people just look at sort of and walk on?
I had a beautiful, sorry to go off piece.
No, I'm interested in the performance.
But there was the one where I said I walked down the main road through this strip of grass. I walked past these bin sheds, right? And I could smell weed before I even got to these bin sheds. And I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, this was like maybe 9 at night. You'd walk past your dog walker who wouldn't notice you. I'm walking along in a pair of size 5 high heels, you know. As I've gone past, I've heard these lads talking, and a couple of them seen what I was doing. I didn't have women's shoes on, but whatever I had, they weren't. You could see they weren't mine. And they said, "What are you doing?" And they were gaffer taped on as well.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
And I went, "Oh," I said, "Look, I'm an artist." So I started talking to them. One of them was asking me questions, like the other two were ripping the piss out of me, but one of them would ask questions where I knew that he was taking an interest, you know. And I'd answer his questions about me finding art in prison, the art I'm doing now, this actual thing. And I was telling them that it was about my mate Kenny, or one section of it was about my mate Kenny who who committed suicide, you know, took his own life, that I'd met in prison. And it was all about all of these different things that, this performance was about. And this young lad, he went, "That's really good." And I went, "Oh, thank you, mate." And I felt like I'd succeeded. So I
Yeah.
walked on this other half mile, got to the end, walked back, and as I'm walking up to this bin shed, I was like, "Oh, fucking please
There you
don't be
go.
there again," you know. But this one lad was still there. He walked along for the last maybe 200 meters with me. He said, "You were saying about stories." He said, "There was one time," he went, "when I was about 13, 14." And I went, "No, no." I said, "Go home, write it down, give me a pair of shoes. I live up there, number 3."
And I'll do
I said,
it.
"Just knock on my door." I said, "Or leave them outside my door with a little note. Then I'll listen to your story." A time later, a week or two, what a month, I don't know how long, but there was a bag outside, envelope and a letter. And Katie, I feel a bit emotional saying it. I felt like fucking crying, to be honest.
Like that interaction alone, do you know what I mean? And getting him to think about that and something that could have been, I imagine for some people, the telling it is a sort of purging away as a way of sort of getting it
Yeah.
out, and it might make you feel a bit better or put some perspective, or even just have someone listen to it, you know?
Yeah. But that is just as getting back to what you mentioned earlier. It was that little connection with someone about something they're doing that clicks with you, which
Yeah.
it did with him. And it has done with me several times on many different occasions. This is a crude little way to getting back to my questions. That was one of my favourite artworks. A question for you is, which piece that you've created has got the strongest emotional connection, be it to you or to someone else?
Oh, I think probably my sort of first theatre work, which was called Work Shy, and it was about work and the things we do for money, but really it was a bit more about sort of class and structures and power dynamics. Because there was and in that show I talk about all the jobs I've kind of done, Burger King, Witherspoons, pubs, selling drugs, sex work, all sorts of different stuff. Um, and there's something, and at the end, I set up a bar, like I turn the stage into a bar, and I invite all the audience to come and have a wee drink with me, which I loved. But the theatres would always get really, I mean, the negotiation with the theatres, because obviously it meant that people went drinking in theirs, and then also they wanted to get out. And I'm like, no, this is the work. Like we're turning the stage into a bar, and everyone's going to get on stage. Do you know what I mean? That way. And there was just all the conversations, like creating that space. And it kind of worked on two levels. There was so many people that come up and just sort of recognized themselves, and like, oh, I worked in Witherspoons, or I this or that, or and then you have, there's almost like two audiences. It's the ones that recognize themselves and get a sort of power or a thought or something about seeing their lives on stage and thinking about it. And then there's the people that are just like, I'd never sort of maybe heard those stories or thought about that or whatever, and their sort of relationship with that. And I'm really try with all my work, is the idea is not, it's not about saying this is the way it is. It's much more about this is how it is.
Yeah.
And so let's think about that, but most importantly, let's think about our role within that. And like there's a lot sort of drugs, recreational drugs is a big massive recurring motif in my work, because I think there's something quite interested about how that sits in society, and the sort of the hypocrisy, of course, around it, and the idea you can really, it's kind of structural as well, what types of drugs are okay and which are not, and
Yeah,
which
yeah.
so there's lots of conversations around that. But I think that bar at the end, the conversations we had, and then the people that would meet each other and start conversations through what they've just seen. I loved holding that space, and that was always just a really special moment. And it meant I get to chat to everybody, and we invade the space, we invade the theatre together as well. So I think that was always a really special moment in that work. Yeah. So perhaps that bar.
What you're saying there, that always strikes a little chord with me, is getting two strangers talking.
Mm,
And that's always been a thing for me. And I don't know whether it's because although I do this sort of more or less for a living, like talking to people, striking up conversation and small talk, I find extremely difficult. I always have. It's also that British thing about, being in a lift or a bus or sitting next to someone. You could sit next to someone for ages and not even say hello. It is quite a strange thing, but the Brits
quite
do it
uptight.
forever.
Yeah, I'd say we're quite uptight here sometimes, a bit repressed, don't we? I
Yeah,
think in Scotland as well, there's a sort of history through religion and things that can be, quite repressed in a way. I mean, I quite like small talk actually, I have to admit. It was interesting, a friend of mine said something recently that we're talking about, like I like to be around people, as it's just something I like. I mean, I suppose I'm a bit of an extrovert. And he was talking about being an introvert, because we were like, well, let's go and we'll do this. And he's like, yeah, but the difference is that when you're with people, that feeds you. But when I'm with people, that can drain me. And I
yeah,
was like, oh, that's a really great way of putting it. Because of course, you always think everybody's like you. You can't really. I was like, that's a really great way of understanding how different people interact in different ways with groups or with one-on-one or whatever.
yeah.
Because it does feed me. I like being around people. I sort of always have. I don't know if it's only child syndrome, but but I lived with my
That's a
granny.
lot to say
Yeah,
there, isn't there?
I lived with my granny right until she passed when I was 16, and then my mum and dad kind of lived there as well. And the house was always busy. Do you know what I mean? There was just always, and she was really big, very religious. She didn't smoke, she didn't drink. She went to mass every day, but there was a big sort of community there in a way, and maybe that was my first kind of taste of that. And the door, and there would always be food on, that Irish like feed you up. And it's like she used to say your name's in the pot, which meant, there was a pot of soup and you'd be getting some, you wouldn't
Yeah,
be able
yeah,
to
yeah,
eat.
yeah,
And so there's something, I don't know if I've just sort of picked up on that hosting and that making people feel, I don't know, there's something I really love about that. But then of course there's days, it's like everyone is highs and lows. There's days literally where I won't leave my bed for 2 days and I just can't see anyone, or I feel anxious about leaving the house and things like that, and I'll stay in the house for days sometimes, and then other times I'm out and I'm like rah rah rah, life and soul. It's a funny old thing, isn't it? The
Well,
brain.
saying that, how you was just expressing that, I sometimes say that I feel like I'm socially bipolar, because sometimes I will not want to be around people, and then other times, I suppose, if it's either if I know them really well or I don't know them at all. That little mid area in between is a rocky one for me. But I don't mind showing off. I don't mind being the Wally and, joking about and, sort of acting up, playing up to the audience, if you like.
Yeah.
Or I will mainly just stand in the corner watching everyone else have a good time, but enjoy that as well, I must add.
Yeah, and you can't be on all the time, can you? Do you know what I mean? It's impossible. And there's so many fronts you put up in so many different situations,
Yeah,
It's tiring. And I think also, like, I've noticed it myself, and I'll be 47 next month, so I'm Gen X, which means that I kind of straddle the analog and the digital. I think
yeah,
we're the last
yeah,
generation that knows kind of both really well. But I do think there has been a difference post-COVID in terms of like me wanting to be out a bit less, or finding it a bit more tiring or not quite right and stuff, because I don't know if you got out of the habit of it, but yeah, I think there's been a real, I mean, we'll never know the impact of
no,
that just it's impossible because there's so many tiny little things that create big masses, you know. But I have, and that's a big thing at the moment with theatre and performances. Audiences have really shifted post.
Really?
It's,
Nice.
yeah, you
I mean,
know,
nice that
it's
you've
like
noticed
ticket
it.
buying. Nobody buys tickets now until like day of, day before, you know, which is also it's quite
Wow, that's
nerve-wracking
funny,
when you're
isn't it?
putting on events. You're like, oh my God. And they come out a bit less. Also, it's the money. I mean, people,
Yeah,
there's not the money around, but audience habits have really changed, particularly towards sort of theatre and performances. There's a lot of chats about it at the moment within the sector, like, you know, what is it? People are used to Netflix. They're used to staying in now. They can get epic stuff, and yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting time. But I think the money has a lot to do with it. You know, even
yeah,
though it can be really like at Battersea Arts Centre was sliding scale. The tickets for the show. So the cheapest ticket was like I think it was £7, and then it goes up to like it's whatever you can
yeah,
afford.
yeah.
But it's not, and you think, well, £7, that's not even, that's probably a pint now in London,
It
actually.
is, yeah, yeah,
And but it's like people would rather go for a few pint. You know, you've just got to think where your money goes. I don't know. I think we're just in a funny space in general right now. You know, as a country,
yeah.
probably as a world.
I don't know if you're aware, but I've spent quite a lot of time in prison. The effects that has had that you've just mentioned is what I'm still feeling now. And I got out over 20 years ago, Katy, is still within me. You know, not liking crowds how I used to. You know, if there's a crowded room, I can't go into it. I can't go to a concert. But I never used to be like that.
Mm.
And I am now. That's just one thing. There's several. But that's what everyone is getting the effect of that cellular existence, if you
Yeah,
like, you know.
yeah. And I
And there's
don't.
positives to it as well. You know, it is.
There's positives. There is, you know, in this sort of shift to online as well as like there is also positives to that. I mean, you do have a lot more time because before it would all, it's, you know, particularly with meetings and stuff like that, you would be like, well, if this was a you you know, online stuff wasn't really that, you know, I'd never even heard the word Zoom before. And
No,
now it's like Zoom,
exactly.
Zoom, Zoom.
Exactly
But
that.
it's like, but that does save you a lot of time because you're not going away out and you're not meeting, but then you're not out in the world, you're kind of inside as
Yeah.
well. So I don't know. It's like everything. There's always good, there's always bad, and I don't know if it's safe to say, but you do stuff comes out of every experience you have, doesn't it? You know,
Yeah.
and
It makes you appreciate the things that you took for granted before, though, mate, didn't it? Sorry to
yeah.
call you mate then.
All right. I hope we're mates. I know we just met, but I hope we're mates.
Right, Katy, you're putting on a production.
All
If
right,
there was
okay.
you and 5 other artists, past or present, what would your ideal live performance be? Or festival?
I have thought about this because I know that's one of your questions. And I've got a very long list and I can't really
Good.
decide because it's really
Yeah.
hard. But it's funny that we were talking about one-to-one performance earlier because I think there was something very special about that, about one-to-one work that you just don't see it anymore because I think it just costs too much money and you don't see as many audiences. So I think I would like to bring back a sort of festival of one-to-one performances where the audience encounter an artist just one-on-one, and you can sort of flow like a big building and you can flow through the building and see different stuff. And I was thinking a lot about artists. I mean, the thing with performance is it's not like art where you have a physical object, you know, it happens and then it's gone
Yeah.
and it lives kind of as a memory or as a talking about or sometimes in a book, but it's not, you just, when I think back to different performances, and of course everybody remembers it all slightly different, which is quite amazing. But there's a lot of artists I think that I haven't seen the work. Like I'd like to see Kira Riley, who's this incredible artist with this sort of dance background. They did one of the things they do is they slowly tumble down a staircase, but over the course of like 6 hours,
Wow.
naked as well, but just it's as if they're tumbling down, but they do it incredibly slowly, and you think, oh God,
Nice.
it doesn't sound, but it is, you can't stop watching it. There's
Yeah.
just something about holding the body in that way as well, you know. So I would love to see that. There's a company called Gob Squad who do a performance called Kitchen, who do all sorts of different performances. I'd love to see them. Adrian Howells, who's no longer with us, who's a massive influence in me. I would like them to be part of it. How many? 5, did we say?
Yes.
And then I'll stick in some more contemporary dance, Trijal Harel, who I absolutely love as well, as a kind of, I'd be interested to see what they would do in that environment. So it's a strange lineup, that, but it could work.
And how do you think the viewer would find that?
I think because all those artists are so great at what they do, and a lot of what they do is thinking about that relationship with the audience. I think it would be quite powerful, I guess, as an audience member, you know. And what I'd really want is a sort of big space where you can kind of congregate as well, so that you can, maybe there's like, what there's like a sort of, everyone knows what each other's seen, so you can talk about it and stuff like that. So have that space. And of course, the focal point was always around the bar, but that's changing now as well. There's a lot of sober spaces, a lot of thinking about what we can do without the bar. I mean, I'm from Glasgow. I do like a good drink, but
It's
I'm
in your
thinking,
blood.
yeah. But what's interesting, I think, I don't know if you found this about being an artist, is that a lot of it is centered around the pub or the bars or the drinking, and that's where a lot of stuff can happen. Do you know what I mean? And if you are someone that doesn't drink, or if you're someone that's maybe sort of socially anxious or doesn't like to go to the after party or to the drinks after, actually it could impact your career in some ways, because
Definitely.
it's where you find bonds. It's where so I'm interested in thinking about other ways that could happen, that's not necessarily around the drinking, but we come from a big drinking culture here. We've got a very funny relationship with alcohol here.
I reckon
So
it's genetic with alcohol, because it goes back to the days when water wasn't safe, so they had to make beer, which was
yeah, and drink gin, didn't they? That's right. Yeah,
exactly that.
yeah.
Katie,
But
what do you reckon you'd do if you wasn't an artist?
I was going to say I'd probably have my own wee pub. Back to Baird. It's just been a big part of my life. Do you know what I mean? Like I did work in clubs and pubs for decades, and I loved it. That environment is something, it can be quite special in a way. And it's like any job, when you get a really good team in a pub, when you get a really good team, and there's those moments, it's just the best. So I could see myself being a landlady for sure. Yeah.
Nice.
I think for me, I like communities. I always find myself in different spaces where it's like we feel we belong, and maybe that's what's happened with my work as well. Is those are the spaces I try to create, just a wee moment where we can feel we can all belong together, because it just feels really
Perfect.
important.
Yeah. And what have you got coming up?
I have just finished this new solo show, which will be in Hamburg in June, but then I'm doing in October, I'll be at Colchester Arts Centre, at Norwich Arts Centre, and at the Stables Theatre in Hastings. So you can check that out on my website, my terrible website, katybaird.com, or on my Instagram. And I'm hoping to get a few more UK. I would like to take it up to Glasgow, so I'm just trying to get it up to Glasgow at the moment, because it would be great to get it to do a homecoming gig, and that's happening. And then check out Home Live Art, which is an organisation I run in Hastings, and we do all different performances along the southeast. So we've just finished our performance festival. We've got another weekend next weekend. Yeah, I'm always up to something. You know how it is.
There's always something in the pipeline.
It's always something.
Well, Katie, that's all my questions asked. Thank you very much for your time.
Gary, thanks so much for inviting me. It's been brilliant, and it's been really, really great to meet you properly.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. It's a podcast that's produced with the help of the listener. And if you like what you've heard and you think you might be able to give a little support, there's 2 ways in which you can do it. If you go over to the Ministry of Arts Instagram profile, you'll find a Linktree drop-down box. And in that box, you'll find 2 links. One is called Buy Us a Coffee, and it's pretty much that. You can make a one-off payment, the price of a cup of coffee. Or If you're able and want to do it more long term, you can become a Ministry of Arts Patreon, where you can sign up to support us on a monthly basis, and 100% of your support goes back into the podcast. And if you're not able to do that, that's absolutely fine. This content is free for everyone. But we would urge you to follow us on your socials and show us a bit of love that way. Either way, thanks for listening and see you next time. Ta-da.